we are not yet where we need to be to move to that new level. But we are moving ahead and should not be timid about recognizing the good things in Mississippi. Now, others will certainly revel in the bad, but as for me, I am proud of my Mississippi.
You will agree the Republican leaders' talking points simply aren't true. What they are really up to in Jackson isn't in the best interest of Mississippi's working families.
The 2015 legislative session is underway. At Issue starts right now. Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Wilson Stribling. Welcome to another season of At Issue, where we discuss and debate the critical issues facing the state of Mississippi and how these issues impact you. And we want you to share your opinions and comments with us. Just go to facebook.com/MPB Online News, and on Twitter, our handle is @IssueMPB. Well, it's the traditional kickoff of the legislative session, the governor's State of the State address. Governor Phil Bryant's speech to the legislature, seen statewide right here on MPB. At Issue's Jeffrey Hess tells us the governor's speech highlighted several proposals.
Well, we know progress is never immediate. It's often made during the most difficult of times. The key to eventually obtaining lasting success is to stay the course, to never abandon your core beliefs and historic principles.
In Governor Phil Bryant's State of the State speech to lawmakers, the governor proposed an income tax cut for working families earning up to $52,000 a year.
It's non-refundable and would be a tax dividend, subject to revenue growth and filling our rainy day fund. Now, I realize the legislative process will generate additional ideas to provide tax relief to Mississippi families. The good news is I am open to any number of tax cuts that puts money in the pockets of working Mississippians. In short, put a tax cut on my desk and I will sign it.
Governor Bryant also proposed the Keep Mississippi Working Fund. It's a $50 million program over the next 2 years to train workers.
These workforce training dollars will be managed by the State Workforce Investment Board and committed to training programs at our community colleges. The Mississippi Economic Council's Blueprint Competitiveness Study identified the need for more skilled laborers in Mississippi and in a centralized agency to manage workforce development. To sum it up, we will keep Mississippi working by investing more in skills training at our community colleges and having faith in Mississippi workers. They can help build the future.
The governor also addressed help for children with special needs and their parents.
This year, we must also do all in our power to help children with special needs. The Equal Opportunity for Students with Special Needs Act will empower parents with educational choice to get their children the service they need. When only 22.5% of special needs children graduate from high school, something is terribly wrong. I'd ask you to send this bill to my desk. Mississippi's children with special needs and their parents deserve nothing less.
Governor Bryant told lawmakers he's working to expand Batson's Children's Hospital.
I am also working with the University of Mississippi Medical Center to bring a $150 million addition to Blair E. Batson, $120 million of which will be raised privately. The work of the Children's Hospital is a phenomenal success story that has saved the lives of so many.
The governor also talked about the no-bid contracts scandal at the Department of Corrections, the need for accountability, and what's being done about it.
With a stellar independent task force to review all contracts within the department, we will make changes to add accountability to the Department of Corrections and beyond. With your help, we will bring long-needed reforms to laws governing state contracts. Including an overhaul of our state's contract review board. This is a new year for Mississippi and for all of us, filled with promise and challenges. Being an optimist, I always look for the greater possibilities. I believe Mississippi can and will improve its public education system, build a stronger economy, become a healthier place to live, and put our people to work.
Well, the governor also said the state is in great financial shape, with the gross domestic product up more than $100 billion since 2012. And state projections for revenue collections are $166 million for 2016. Now to the Democrats. They are expected to butt heads with the GOP on several issues outlined in the governor's speech. Democrats blame Republicans for underfunded schools, underpaid workers, high unemployment rates, and a crumbling infrastructure. Here's how Democratic lawmakers responded to the governor's speech.
I like the governor. He's a good man. But I think we have to be very realistic and very practical about what our needs are here in the state, and let's just do something. And what we propose to do is, if we're talking about jobs, let's create some jobs. And one of the areas that I concentrate on is the Department of Transportation and our highways and roads. We have a homegrown industry in road construction here, and we have a very serious need in bridge and road repair and renovation. And just by putting money into our roads, and our roads repaving, resurfacing, our bridge construction, we could create 9 jobs per mile. And we've lost 41,000 jobs in the last, since 2007. Population has grown 230,000. Let's put those people back to work and put some money into the economy.
I think this governor is probably one of the worst public speakers that I have seen in Mississippi politics. And unfortunately for him, the numbers that, our job numbers just don't square up with what he's trying to tell Mississippians. So I think that Representative Robert Johnson had it right when he said that the governor's numbers on jobs is just spin. It's only that. And until we do something to change things in the state of Mississippi, like changing our leadership, then things aren't going to change it. And I found it very ironic that our governor said the key to success was just to don't change anything. Well, we're number 50 in every category that matters, and our governor is telling us we shouldn't change anything. I don't agree with that. I don't think most Mississippians agree with that.
I think the governor gave a lot of ideas and presented a lot of opportunities. I think the challenge to him is carrying out what he believes in. I think it needs to be stronger on substance than just a matter of speech. Well, things need to be addressed. We have state employees that hadn't had a pay raise in 7 years. We've got a failing Department of Public Safety in the sense we don't have enough manpower. We have schools that's been struggling with these park assessment tests. We have a lot of things in education where he appointed the board of education that needs to be addressed. And there's a lot of critical issues that he needs to address with a substantive attitude and not just talk about them.
And he skipped over that in his speech.
He did not address the critical needs of the state employees, the state health plan, and school funding in districts where they don't have enough opportunity or don't have a way of raising millage to cover the cost and the mandates that the state's given them. And that's what we're about, is education, transportation, and public health and public safety. And until those issues are dealt with in a substance matter, then I think his executive power is not being used to help in those areas.
The Democrats say they will fight for legislation this session for women to have equal pay in the workplace, improve funding for hospitals, and protect the state retirement system. Well, each week during the legislative session, we will have what is expected to be a lively debate and exchange of ideas from representatives from the Republicans and the Democrats. We call it the At Issue Roundtable. First, let me introduce Austin Barber. He is a Republican. He was a senior advisor for the Senator Thad Cochran campaign. He's the founding partner of Clearwater Group, and he is an Ole Miss graduate. Austin, welcome. Brandon Jones is a Democrat serving 4 years in the Mississippi House of Representatives from 2008 to 2012. He's currently the executive director of a political action committee called the Mississippi Democratic Trust. He is an attorney at the Beria Williamson Law Firm and has degrees from Mississippi College, Wake Forest University, and Mercer University. Brandon, welcome. We thank you both for being here on At Issue. Well, let's start with the State of the State address. Let me start with you, Austin. What did you think of the governor's speech?
Well, I thought it was great. I thought it was wonderful to hear the governor highlight his accomplishments as he has been in office for these past 3 years. Obviously, he's beginning year 4, setting the tone for what this legislative session is going to be. It's good to hear him talk about tax cut, giving a tax raise to the taxpayers, putting money in workforce development. That's obviously very important to make sure that our labor is skilled, so we have new businesses like Nissan and Ingalls that come here. We've got workforce that's ready to go.
Brandon?
Well, I think that triumphant tone that the governor struck probably sounded hollow in the ears of folks who are dealing with this higher unemployment rate than any other state in the country, and the fact that we now have 41,000 less jobs today than we did in 2007. And so this talk of silver shovels, this talk of accolades from magazines, probably didn't sound quite right to folks who are living in the real world trying to make ends meet in Mississippi.
So what about that, Austin? What about the folks who are struggling to find a job?
Well, listen, it's always government's job to do the best that they can to try to attract new businesses, better jobs and better pay for the citizens of Mississippi. But when you look at the numbers right now, we had 8,800 more jobs that were created in Mississippi in 2014 than there were in 2013. Big employers like Nissan bringing on about 1,500 more employees. And of course, you know, we're all coming out of, every state across the country is coming out of the recession that began at the beginning of Obama's first administration, first term. And if you look at our unemployment right now, it was about 10% a couple years ago, and now it's closer to 7%. These are positive things that we're seeing under the leadership of Governor Bryant, Lieutenant Governor Reeves, and of course, Speaker Philip Gunn.
Well, we expect each year for education to be a big topic. It seems like it's going to be a bigger topic this year than in previous years. Austin, what do you expect to see the governor do in terms of education this year?
Well, I think that the governor and the leadership of the legislature, the lieutenant governor and the speaker, know that education has to be a priority. If you look at the spending that we have in education, 60% of the general fund is put into education, about 40% in K through 12. Fortunately, they gave the teachers a pay raise. You know, my mother was a teacher as I was a little boy growing up, and it's good to see teachers get paid. They should get paid more. They certainly deserve it. But they got a $2,500 pay raise last year. That was very positive to see. Funding will continue to increase, I would assume, this year. So the Republicans believe in setting high standards that our children we know that they can accomplish. Let's don't set low standards that are easy to accomplish. High standards and figure out a way to bring more money into education.
Brandon, do you think the administration is going down the right road with education at this point?
Not at all. I think that until we do that most basic thing of funding our public schools to the point where we can promise every young child in Mississippi an adequate education, we're not doing our part. And so for us, funding is always that most essential question before we move on to some of these other pieces. And you know, by muddying the waters on an initiative which would allow for the overage in tax payments to be applied to our education budget so that we could maybe begin to get back to that formula that was passed so many years ago, for us to be confusing the language on that, it's troubling, and it shows me that this administration's priorities are certainly not fully funding our public schools.
And we'll get to that initiative in just a moment. What Brandon, did you not hear in the in the governor's address that you wish you had heard?
Well, I think that Representative Robert Johnson struck the right tone when he mentioned that there is a very ready-made way for us to create jobs in Mississippi right now. We have a crumbling infrastructure which includes declining roads and failing bridges. If we were simply to pay back the Mississippi Department of Transportation the money that we borrowed from that budget in 2009, when I was in the legislature, then we could create quite a few jobs to the tune of about 9 per mile. And so we're talking about a real opportunity that's there and something that is underutilized, unfortunately.
Austin, you get the last word here, just a few seconds remaining.
I would say real quickly, when you go and you look at President Obama's administration, how his U.S. Department of Education looks at spending in Mississippi, they rank Mississippi as ranked 12th out of 50 as in terms of funding and education. That's great of how our own national government under President Obama views Mississippi, ranked 12th on spending.
All right, Austin Barber, Brandon Jones, thank you both for being with us on At Issue today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
One move by lawmakers raising eyebrows is the rewording of an education initiative on the ballot later this year to amend the state constitution on the funding of schools. At Issue's Paul Boger spoke with Jake McGraw from the William Winter Institute and Rethink Mississippi to get a better understanding of the initiative and what it will mean to voters.
Jake, thanks for joining us today. Let's just get right into it. There's a proposed constitutional amendment known as 42A that will appear on this November's general election ballot. So what is 42A?
Well, thanks for having me here. To understand what 42A is, you first have to understand what 42 is. Initiative 42 is a proposal to change the Mississippi State Constitution to add language that would give every Mississippian the right to an adequate and efficient public education. Right now, there's no such language. We have a very weak statute or education provision in the state constitution, which essentially means education is whatever the legislature says it is. Initiative 42 started with the Better Schools, Better Jobs initiative. They've collected signatures for much of the past year. The group itself claims 200,000 signatures. Secretary of State certified 116,000 signatures from equal representation across the state. And so that, because of the citizen initiative process, is enough to put that question of whether Mississippi voters want to change the state constitution on the November 2015 ballot. What 42A is the legislative alternative. So buried in the election code, when they created the citizen-sponsored initiative process, they gave the legislature essentially a trap door, saying that if the legislature doesn't like this initiative that's been gotten citizen support, then they can craft alternative language that will appear alongside of the original language on the ballot. And so this has never been used before. It's misunderstood. It's uncharted waters in a lot of ways. But this legislative session, the legislature decided that they were going to use that trapdoor to try to, some would say, complicate the process for voters in November.
So how is this proposed constitutional amendment, this 42, how is that different from the state's current funding mechanism, the Mississippi Adequate Education Program?
So 42 would essentially take MAEP, which was passed by the legislature as statute in 1997, and enshrine that in the state constitution. So the legislature has only funded MAEP a couple of times since it was originally passed. Theoretically, if it were in the Constitution, then there would be a judicial recourse. So if the legislature did not meet their obligation to funding MAEP, then there could be litigation to go through the state courts that would then potentially force the legislature to allocate more money to education. 42A has no such provision. They would, in fact, the alternative language says that they would add the word effective into the Mississippi State Constitution when it talks about giving everybody an effective education. But there's no mention of funding. And when the bill was being debated on the floor, that question was posed. What's the fiscal impact of this bill? The sponsor, Representative Snowden, said that there is none. They wanted to make it very clear that their alternative does not make any mention of funding. And so that really is the clearest distinction between the two alternatives that are going to appear on the ballot. One requires funding of MAEP, and the other does not.
Now, both of these will appear on the ballot side by side, correct?
In a way, and this is where it gets complicated. So they'll appear side by side, but to get to the question where you vote on them side by side, you first have to answer an initial question that asked whether you want to support a constitutional amendment about education, period. So you can say, it'll be phrased something like, do you support either initiative or neither initiative? And so if you say, yes, I support either initiative, then you go to the second question where you're supposed to decide which of the two amendments that you prefer. If you and there's so a lot of this is actually premature to be talking about what it's going to look like on the ballot because, as I said, this has never been done before in Mississippi, and so the Secretary of State's office doesn't actually have a they don't have precedent to go by, and so they've said themselves that they're working on how this is actually going to be interpreted and how it's actually going to be presented to voters.
But there is also a weird formula that is involved. So many people have to pass the initial measure, and then they come down to the choice between 42 and 42A. That's decided already.
And this I think is the most important thing, is the mathematics of it. To adopt an amendment, there has to be majority support on both of those two questions. The first, whether you support an amendment at all, and then the preferred amendment has to get a majority of the support of those who vote on the second question. But what makes it tricky and actually quite diabolical is that to be adopted, the amendment on the second question has to get 40% of the overall vote for the general election. And so that means anybody who votes, period, cast a ballot, whether they vote for the initiative on either question, for or against, or if they skip it altogether. And generally there's a drop-off of about 3 to 5% where people vote for governor but they don't vote at the very end of the ballot for the initiatives. That's still taken into consideration in this 40%. It also creates a system where since you have two alternatives on the second question, they're going to split that vote, which means that there's a possibility that 60% of people could say, yes, we want to amend the state constitution, and 68% of people say, we prefer the original Initiative 42 language, the one that was circulated on petitions that 116,000 plus people signed. It could get landslide support on both of those questions and still not be adopted based on the mathematics that are buried in the Mississippi Election Code.
Jake McGraw from the William Winter Institute and Rethink Mississippi, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you would like to see our extended interview with Jake McGraw, you can go to our website, mpbonline.org. Well, there are many issues we are tracking this session, and there's one man here at That Issue who does it better than anyone else. Let's welcome back Jeffrey Hess. Jeffrey, good to have you with us. You practically live at the Capitol. You live and breathe this stuff, so you're always a good person to bounce these things off of. Let's talk about this Common Core vote. We know about the ballot initiative. We just talked about that. Common Core keeps coming back into all these conversations. What have they been doing at the Capitol in the past few days about this?
Well, this is a huge issue in conservative circles. There's a lot of anxiety around Common Core, and they really dislike it. It's a new set of education standards that are supposed to set a higher bar for kids. Mississippi is one of, I think, 45 states that adopted them. But it's gotten a lot of attention recently, especially ahead of this election year. So the legislature is moving to kind of put some distance between themselves and the issue of Common Core by saying, hey, we're doing something to get rid of Common Core, to get Obama and the federal government out of Mississippi, while also not substantively changing the new higher standards. So what they did was they passed a couple of bills this week after a little bit of a contentious row that puts some distance between between Mississippi and the federal government, and also renames Common Core to something that's the Mississippi Career and College Readiness Standards. But the fact of the matter is, the standards and what's being taught in schools is going to remain pretty much the same. So here, House Education Chair John Moore is going to explain, if they're not really changing the substance of Common Core, why take this up?
Well, because the State Board of Education has disconnected itself from PARC, which is identified with the Common Core standards. It would be time for us to say, okay, whatever standards we have are the Mississippi College and Career Ready standards, and that's what we're doing. Now, whether they decide tomorrow to go in and tweak them or change them or increase them or decrease them, that's strictly and always has been a function of the State Board of Education and their experts that are over there that really know curriculum.
So currently, before this.
So, Jeffrey, is the only substantive change that's happened the PARC test, the moving away from the PARC test?
Yeah, and the state board had moved away from that initially. The only other substantive change is that they're not going to use the federal accountability standards. They're going to develop their own. Previously, there was going to be one set of accountability standards for both the federal and the state government to how to measure schools nationwide, which varies wildly.
I mean, that's not the last we'll hear on that issue, I'm sure. What do you expect to come up in the coming week?
Well, this week is going to be a big committee week. There's a legislative deadline the following week. So this is the time when committees are going to start cranking out bills. There's going to be lots of committee hearings on things that Republicans want to bring forward. And I say Republicans because they control the committee process, so they're in charge of what comes up and what doesn't. Right. This could be the first time we get a look at a legislative proposal on a tax cut. The governor kind of fired the first shot with his income tax cut proposal, saying in his State of the State address, and this could be our first chance to see what the legislature wants to do. Everyone's talking tax cuts, so that's really the big thing from a legislative angle that's going to be happening this week.
At the beginning of the session, we always see lots of rallies at the Capitol, different groups trying to take their calls to lawmakers. We saw that last week. What do you expect in terms of rallies in the coming week? And
certainly we'll see that all year long, especially on the issue of education, both from Common Core opponents who, if they don't like what the legislature's done, will definitely make that known, and from full funding of MAEP people will also make that known. On Monday, there's going to be a rally in support of mandatory kindergarten. Mississippi's compulsory education age is 6, which is first grade. This is not all that uncommon. There's only a handful of states that require compulsory kindergarten, but the Department of Education says 2/3 of kids are coming to kindergarten not prepared.
And the state's dipped into that a bit with some pilot programs.
Yeah, they're trying to get education earlier into a child's life, because the state lawmakers are putting a lot of new pressure on districts to perform. And the districts are saying, well, if we need to perform, we need to be getting these kids earlier. And if you've got 2/3 of kids coming to Common Core or coming to kindergarten not prepared, that's a problem. So look for that this week.
All back to education, it seems. So many of these issues hang on education. Jeffrey Hess, thank you as always. We're out of time. Please join us again next Friday night on MPB for another edition of At Issue.